A few weeks before Earth Day in 2010, political scientist David Moore and I met for some reason in the bagel shop in Durham with the intention of designing a timeless survey question about climate change. Here's what we came up with. Which of the following three statements do you think is more accurate? Climate change is not happening now. Climate change is happening now, but caused mainly by natural forces. Or climate change is happening now, caused mainly by human activities. That last choice intentionally corresponded to pretty closely, just a paraphrase of the position statements issued by just about every major scientific society on Earth. So by tracking what percentage of people agreed with that, with the scientific consensus, we intended to sort of take the pulse of U.S. public opinion on climate change. Well, that question has been answered now by more than 46,000 people on about 60 surveys, ranging regional surveys from coastal Louisiana to Alaska, on nationwide surveys, including the gold standard general social survey, and importantly on about 46 surveys in New Hampshire, conducted roughly every 3 months since 2010. So what did we find? We did not find what we expected to see, which is big impacts from new scientific reports, political events, public opinion, or hurricanes, major disasters, that sort of thing. They at most made very minor blips in the timeline. What we did see is a very gradual rise, hence the title of my talk, from somewhere around half of the people agreeing with the scientific consensus to a little bit short of 2/3, and this occurring over a period of 11 years. There are two researchers at Duke University who published some studies recently demonstrating that people's opinions or the responses to survey questions mostly reflect settled dispositions, which remain the same over the individual's lifetime for most of those questions. And there's a relatively less common process of active updating where people change their opinions as they acquire new information. So many questions, there's no active updating, and on some there's a fairly small amount. Climate change is a high-profile topic in which new information is coming out almost every day. And I think that's why we see at least some evidence of active updating in that slow dawning of public opinion. But it's happening painfully slowly. The pace of the rise is dangerously slow compared to the pace of climate change itself. The researchers identified one group, however, for whom active updating of opinions is a little bit more common, and that is young adults. And indeed, if we break down our survey results by generation, we see that Generation Z, which is people born since 1997, their acceptance of the scientific consensus on climate change was rising over this period at about twice the rate of any of the older generations. Now, that's hopeful in the long run as they become a larger fraction of the public, but generational replacement is a very slow process too. And practical steps toward more climate-aware policies could be hastened much faster than generational replacement by a substantial rise in voting participation. So there's potential for the slow dawn to speed up there. If we see more voting towards climate-aware policies by young adults who are disproportionately, given their longer time horizons, disproportionately going to feel the effects of climate change. However, because of generational differences in views, legislation discouraging participation by young voters could have long-lasting consequences. For example, New Hampshire State Legislature is currently considering a number of bills that would make it more difficult for college students to vote. And the outcome of such efforts could shape the future in many ways. I'm sure you can all think of this, but from the most local issues up to the scale of Earth's future climate.